The general manager meetings are underway in Las Vegas. Rick Hahn speaks up about Andrew Vaughn, Yasmani Grandal, Oscar Colas, and how the roster might be constructed this offseason. Will the White Sox focus on internal options, or will some money actually be spent? Hahn also discussed the starting rotation and had a lot to say about analytics. It's hot stove season, or maybe for White Sox fans, it's more of a lukewarm season.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Sox fans, welcome to Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. Each and every day, we're free and available on all platforms. Follow us on Twitter at Locked On Sox. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search Locked On White Sox. Hey, I'm your host, Nick Morawski, a lifelong diehard Chicago White Sox fan, recording this podcast just blocks from the ballpark in beautiful Bridgeport. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Really appreciate you letting me steal some of your time to talk off-season White Sox. Locked On White Sox is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Could Johnny Cueto be back with the White Sox, or will 2023 be the year of Davis Martin? MLB power rankings are out for next season, and the White Sox are exactly where you'd think an 81-81 team would be. Also, Rick Hahn said a lot of things that will need to be decoded. First things first, let's look around the league here. Hated seeing this little blurb here, but you kind of knew it was coming. Not where he was going to land. I didn't want to face that reality, but maybe you saw this from Bruce Levine. Jose Abreu will declare for free agency this week. Zero chance of returning to the White Sox. And once he becomes a free agent, the Chicago Cubs will express strong interest in signing him. I can't imagine Jose Abreu in any other uniform. It's sad that it's come down to this, where the Sox have kind of put themselves. I face the reality that the Sox will not bring Jose Abreu back, but the fact that he could be wearing a Chicago Cubs uniform and helping them out on the north side, too much to stomach. I don't even want to think about that right now. The Milwaukee Brewers are picking up second baseman Colton Wong's $10 million club option. So we've talked a lot on this podcast, of course, second base situations, and that Colton Wong might be someone that the White Sox want to target this offseason. That will not be an option. The Philadelphia Phillies, however, declined to pick up Gene Segura's option, so he hits the open market. And if you haven't heard, folks, it is Michael Conforto season. Michael Conforto's agent, Scott Boras, is getting everyone in a lather once again for Conforto's services. Scott Boras suggesting interest in Michael Conforto is indeed broad. Quote, "It is Christmas for the Confortos," end quote, according to Boras. Tons of interest from White Sox fans last season in regards to Michael Conforto. Lefty bat, plays the outfield. Perfect spot for the White Sox. Definitely need that, especially with A.J. Pollock declining his option. Conforto did not play in 2022 because of shoulder surgery he had in late April. Now, he's got 7 years in the league. Career slash line 255, 356, 468. His numbers dropped off in 2021, possibly, dealing with that injury. But Conforto to the White Sox has been a rumor for a long time, almost as much as Jack Peterson to the Sox. So does it make sense? I could see that. Lefty bat, a corner outfielder, sure. Will the Sox prioritize outfield? Will they spend money? And where's Conforto at? Is he healthy? He didn't play at all in 2022. I don't know how aggressive the Sox are going to be in that situation. Remember, players cannot begin signing with new teams until Thursday at 5 p.m. MLB came out with a very early 2023 power rankings. No real surprise here. Chicago White Sox are tied for 14th place with the Baltimore Orioles. Guardians are in the 12 spot. I know it. You know it. Everybody knows that the White Sox need to address second base. I'm going to tell you why an internal option will probably be the likely option. More on that in a moment. Today's episode is brought to you by SimpliSafe. If you've thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you'll want to listen up. Right now, Locked On White Sox listeners can order the #1 rated SimpliSafe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Did you know that over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package theft spike nationally? That's why our friends at SimpliSafe Home Security are offering 50% off their award-winning security system. So now more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season. Order your SimpliSafe system for half off today and enjoy advanced security and greater peace of mind this holiday season. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from SimpliSafe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. SimpliSafe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated SimpliSafe app, stay in control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on this security system. Get the 50% off deal on SimpliSafe systems at simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. It's the GM meetings. They are underway in Las Vegas. Went through a bunch of different articles, saw a ton of stuff on social media. Scott Merkin covering the White Sox for MLB.com. He's been doing that for a while. Had a lot out on social media, some of Rick Hahn's quotes. This was Rick Hahn addressing the second base situation. Quote, second base, we obviously have internal options right now, Romy, Leury, and Mendick, Sosa, but it is an area where we feel we will spend some time this offseason to see if there's a better way, end quote. This is definitely a quote we're going to revisit when Leury Garcia is starting second baseman on opening day. But, Rick Hahn is careful with his wording. Usually, we will spend time this offseason to see if there's a way to get better. That part, so vague and non-committal. Hahn speaking about internal options is troubling for me. Not surprising, though. At least he didn't say that he was bullish on Romy, Leury, and Mendick. Rick Hahn talking about Andrew Vaughn. Quote, Vaughn is a first baseman. That's how he was drafted. Does it mean he's going to be our first baseman next year? Not necessarily. He wasn't either of the past two seasons. But in the end, his best defensive position is first base, and perhaps when the time comes, he ultimately settles into that position. You are asking a lot less of him, and perhaps that even increases his offensive production as a result, end quote. Yeah, it is very funny how that works sometimes. A player will have a very productive year at the plate because they are more relaxed due to the fact that they no longer have to worry about playing a position they had no business playing in the first place. I'd be shocked if they let Abreu walk and trade Andrew Vaughn, essentially turning first base over to Gavin Sheets. You would need to absolutely get an impactful, ready to go, controllable talent for Vaughn if you are at all serious about 2023. Again, maybe the White Sox are not that serious about 2023. It all comes down to this roster construction. Let's go to an article that James Fegan from The Athletic wrote recently, some quotes in there. Rick Hahn just talked for an hour. James Fegan said there was a lot of stuff, but he did bring up Oscar Colas on his own as a replacement in right field as A.J. Pollock opted out. According to James Fegan, Hahn said trade was a more likely route than free agency, but that he expected roughly the same payroll as 2022. Remember, that was $196 million. Again, folks, it's not necessarily the amount of money. It's how the money is spent, how the roster is constructed. Can Grifol get the players to buy into his philosophy? Refraining from players playing out of position would be a great start. According to Fegan, in answering a question about White Sox analytics department, Hahn said he expected their work to play a bigger role in on-field decisions by the new manager than it did for the last. Quote, it will be a greater priority on this staff than it was on the last, but we certainly have the resources in place and continue to expand in that area to meet whatever needs Grifol and his assistants have. We operate a little bit more quietly than perhaps some other clubs. We don't list in the media guide certain consultants who work with the organization or certain resources that we have. But I get that perception. It goes back 20 years that we were not necessarily at the forefront of analytics. I will say that, how should I put this? I think for the last several years, it's factored in our player development and our scouting decisions. And I think going forward, it will play an even larger role in our on-field decision-making, end quote. So the transparency is refreshing, but the facts are troubling. And really, if you followed this team closely for 20 plus years, I mean, it's no surprise. I appreciate Grifol's ability to speak analytics and his intention on having everyone get on the same page. But how long does that all take? Can it happen during the off season, during spring training, or, is analytic adoption, the way Grifol sees it, more of a multi-seasonal thing? More Rick Hahn on Andrew Vaughn from the Athletic article by James Fegan. Quote, he was a guy over the course of the year, played through leg issues, probably somewhat exasperated having him in the outfield. We've asked a lot of that kid in the last couple years, and I think he's performed quite well. All things considered, his lack of experience, his age, and the fact that we were playing him out of position, end quote. Again, this quote from Hahn magnifies just how many steps backwards the White Sox have taken, especially this past season. You drafted Vaughn as a first baseman, but knowingly played him out of position, just hoping there were no long-term issues. And then here's Hahn on a possible Cueto reunion. Quote, Cueto gave us some good chunk innings and pitched well in them. That's a void right now. Finding a way to fill that would be good. Now Davis Martin's an option, so it's not an emergency by any stretch, but no one is ever going to feel comfortable that they have enough pitching, end quote. So here's your translation right here. Don't be at all surprised if Davis Martin is the fifth starter in 2023. And Hahn, speaking about catcher and Grandal, quote, catcher was one area where we underperformed last year. Doesn't mean we feel we necessarily have to go out and address that. Grandal had his struggles and physical issues in 2022, and it's important not to lose sight how productive he was the year before. And having Yasmani be right, the 2021 version, much less the guy he was leading up to that. That guy is a huge asset to the 2023 White Sox. Fortunately, we'll have a full offseason to get him healthy. His work with Pedro, we think, will be beneficial, and knock on wood, we'll get him back to the level he was at in 2021, end quote. The old knock on wood approach by Rick Hahn there. I don't know about you, but that statement right there does not give me a lot of confidence moving forward. But honestly, I've been pretty sour on Grandal and don't expect much from him. With AJ Pollock out of the picture, could Oscar Colas be the answer in right field? I'm going to tell you why that should not be the first option. More on that in a moment. This from Daryl Van Scoven of the Chicago Sun-Times. Rick Hahn not ruling out possibility of Oscar Colas being White Sox right fielder in 2023. This is Hahn, quote, we think a lot of Oscar Colas. Don't lose sight of that. Doesn't mean there won't be external outfield additions, but I don't want him to get lost in your off-season analysis of where we are, end quote. We'll head into camp and see where we're at. Obviously, there will be off-season check-ins as well and see where the progress is at. But he impressed us last year, and he is on a real good trajectory to contribute in a meaningful way as soon as next year, end quote. So Oscar Colas, 24 years old. He slashed 314, 371, 524 with 23 home runs and an 895 OPS in 117 games at 3 different levels, including 7 at AAA Charlotte in 2022. Would provide a left-handed bat for a right-handed heavy lineup. I really wish it would have been possible to see Oscar Colas in September of this past year. Just give him some experience heading into the offseason. Colas is an exciting option, but like Sosa or Rodriguez, he's young, and putting that starting right field label on him in 2023 might be unfair. However, the White Sox did it with Luis Robert in 2020. Right now, folks, as long as it's not Gavin Sheets, I'll be happy. So what do we make of all this Hahn speak? I think over the years, Rick Hahn has been more and more careful. Comments like the money will be spent to win multiple championships or ask me after the parade. Those types of comments have come back to haunt him. It was a little over a year ago that James Fegan wrote a piece in The Athletic highlighting Rick Hahn's plan for the 2021-22 offseason, and Hahn infamously said the White Sox are bullish on Vaughn and Sheets. Here's that quote. We feel very bullish on the futures of Andrew Vaughn and Gavin Sheets. We envision them playing significant roles on multiple White Sox clubs going forward. We will spend some time over the next few months figuring out what is the best fit for them in 2022. Could be DH possibilities, right field possibilities. They're both natural first basemen, and we've seen how quickly Andrew acclimated to left field. They provided us with good options and flexibility. So Rick Hahn told us the plan at that point, but a lot of fans, me included, could not believe that Gavin Sheets would be viewed as a serious right fielder. So when Hahn talks about not spending money and improving through the trade market or mentioning the internal options at second base, I tend to believe him, unfortunately. Hope for the best, but expect nothing. Folks, thank you so much for making this podcast part of your daily routine. You can find the Locked On White Sox podcast absolutely everywhere you find your podcasts. We are on Twitter at Locked On Sox. You can find me on Twitter at Nick_GGTB. Thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on the next episode, I'll continue to examine off-season White Sox scenarios as the Sox go full steam ahead with the Pedro Grifol era. Really appreciate you making time for the Locked On White Sox podcast. I'm Nick Morawski, Until next time, go Sox.